Okay, hello everyone. Today I'm going to present a paper about quantization. It's FlatQuant, one of the SOTA method nowadays, which is accepted in XML 2025. And let's start with some background to motivate the quantization. You know, a single GPU, for example, the NVIDIA H100 provides around 80 GB of the memory and roughly 67 teraflops in FP32 precisions. But nowadays, when we look at large-scale LLMs, which with hundreds of billions of parameters, the computational demand is enormous. For example, running a 300 billion parameter model would require nearly 600 GB of storage. And also, when we try to calculate roughly the first token latency, you can see the time it takes to generate the first token during the inference will be quite long. So the quantization, they try to mitigate such bottlenecks like lower computation workload, lower latency, lower memory storage, lower power consumption, also higher throughput. And we can see more examples here. On this slide, we illustrate the basic idea of quantization. And normally, we represent activation or weights as the floating point numbers. So the multiplication is performed in floating point arithmetic. However, if we quantize them into small integers, say 4-bit integers, then the multiplication becomes the integral multiplication, which is much cheaper. So it is shown here, multiplying two int4 numbers can be as simple as an integral multiply followed by a rescaling step. And this simple example highlights how quantization replaces expensive floating point operations with integral operations. And here's another background we need to see about where to do the quantization. Basically, we will make the operation on 3 sections. First is the weights. These are the parameters of the model, the largest contributors. Also activation. These are the intermediate results to inference, which also take up substantial memory. And also the last one is the carry cache. Autoregressive generation, the carry cache grows with the sequence length, and they will dominate memory consumption during decoding. And maybe someone will ask, why don't we quantize on the layer node? Because they are unstable and very sensitive. So most of the methods will ignore them. And here's another background when to do the quantization. There are 2 main approaches to the quantization. The first is quantization of real training, or QAT. In the model learns to adapt to quantization noise. This is it usually gives high accuracy, but it requires expensive retraining. And the second approach here is post-training quantization, or PTQ. Here we take a pre-trained model and quantize it directly without retraining. PTQ is very fast, simple, and requires no extra training cost. It has no inference overhead and can achieve accuracy close to 4% if we designed it carefully. And this paper's method, FlatQuant, belongs to the PTQ family. The goal is to make PTQ as effective as possible for the large LLMs. And also, let's look at some quantization granularity. The simplest scheme here is per tensor quantization, which uses 1 scale and 0 points for the entire tensor. So it's easy to implement, but it cannot handle outliers very well because we have many outliers across the whole tensor. If we just do the quantization on it, we may have a lot of range problem or the precision problem. The second one is much more flexible, is per channel quantization, where each row or column of a weight matrix gets its own scaled factor. And this adapts better to variation across channels. And also we can go even further. by dividing the tensor into smaller groups, each group with its own scale. This is known as group quantization. And recent methods such as GPGQ, AWQ, and this paper proposed FlatQuant all fall into the group quantization, the poor vector quantization, because it offers the best balance between accuracy and efficiency. And now, however, quantization is not just about choosing the right place or time and to quantize. We also need to know how to do it, how to transform the distribution of the weights or activations before the quantization. We have a figure here. This figure compares three types of transformation. On the left, we can see the scaling transformation. Scaling only stretches or compress a vector along the same direction. So the fixed point remains as the origin and only the magnitude changes. And which means it's limited because it cannot reorient the distribution. And let's look at the middle one. We see the translation. Translation shifts the vector by a bias turn. While this can move the distribution to a new region, the orientation and the scaling remain unchanged. And let's look at the right one. We see the affine transformation. This generation, so it's both generalize the scaling and the translation, and more importantly, it allows rotation of the space. And you can see the difference in the three subfigures. The red shaded region shows that the affine transformation can both rescale and reorient the distribution, and such flexibility makes them much more effective. Okay, this is about, so in summary, this paper, although these many methods, they are based on the affine transformation. And this paper also is based on a method called the rotation matrix-based quantization. This is the theory of the rotation matrix-based quantization from the core root accepted by Neurips 24. This is the father of all the rotation matrix-based method. And then in the academia 25, spring quant was proposed with more calibrated rotation matrix. And the last one is this paper, FlatQuant. They do more specific operations in different layers, and also they try to use quadratic decomposition to reduce the computational cost. Now let's look at some preliminaries. First of all, since we have talked about the rotation matrix, so we need to see some definition. Let's say orthogonal matrices. Rotation matrices are kinds of orthogonal matrices, and they are preferred for the quantization. Why? First, they have the following contributions as the right points. They help with the geometry preservation by applying an orthogonal transformation. The relative distances between vectors are preserved, which helps maintain their model semantics. The second point is that they support outlier dispersion. Let's say outliers that are concentrated in a few dimensions, which can be spread across all dimensions after the rotation. So this will make the distribution more balanced. And third point is that the rotations are reversible and efficient. Multiplying by an orthogonal matrix and its inverse is computationally cheap and does not introduce information loss. So these properties makes the rotation a strong tool. Also makes the orthogonal matrix-based one strong for the quantization. Just now we talk about the orthogonal matrix, and this is about more details of the rotation matrix. Here, the key distinguish of them is that the rotation matrix, its determinant must be positive one, meaning it performs only rotation, no flip or reflection. What's the benefits of it? So they provide stable invariance, meaning certain properties of the data remain unchanged after the rotation, such as the norms. Also, this stability is useful because it ensures the model's function behavior. And In addition, there is a degree of interpretability, I think. By analyzing the rotated representations, we can sometimes better understand the structure of the weights or the activation of the distributions. So anyway, the rotation matrices give us both practical and theoretical advantage. And so what the nowadays SOTA methods do is that they try to use the Hadamard matrices. One special case of the rotation of the rotation matrix, many researchers said it's better than other frequency domain transformation method. Unlike general rotations, which require dense matrix multiplication, the Hadamard transform can be computed very efficiently using just owning additions and compute and subtractions. Yes, so its complexity is O n log n, and so this makes it especially attractive for large models. Hadamard transformation therefore provides a low-cost approximation to more general rotation, and meanwhile, it's still dispersing outliers effectively. And let's look back to this paper, their intuition behind the flatness. This figure, it shows the distribution of weights and input from the Llama 3 models, specifically the 8 bits and the 70 bits variants. So you can see the channels are sorted by their F norms. What we observe is very unbalanced distribution. Some channels dominate with very large magnitudes, while many others are relatively small. So this imbalance means that a single global scaling factor will either waste dynamic range on the small values or clip the large ones. In other words, the distribution are highly anisotropic. So the key idea of the proposed FlatQuant is to make this distribution flatter before quantization, so that all the channels can be represented more evenly within the low bit quantization grid. And they also give a figure of the MSE of the quantization. We have 4 subfigure per channel scaling, Hadamard transform, and the FlatQuant. Also the overview of all these three methods. We can formalize this intuition by these figures. If the distribution is good or concentrated in certain directions, we can see the error will be much larger. So this slide shows how quantization MSE varies across different transformations. So by applying the transformations that flatten the weight or the activation distribution, we can significantly reduce MSE. And both, you can see both the per channel scaling and the Hadamard transform, they are powerless to these errors. Instead, their proposed FlatQuant shows much lower error as these tokens from, as you can see in the subfigure C. Second, the quantization error increase layer wisely, but it's less evident along the input sequence. So let's say the subfigure D, the FlatQuant is the best in controlling the error propagation, followed by other methods. Now let's look at the methodology. Now we present the first step of their method, the fast and learnable affine transformation. So it's interesting, their title FlatQuant, they have two meanings. One is the flatness, the other is their methodology, fast and learnable affine transformation. And they introduce some affine matrix, just like we said, the affine transformation, which is applied to both weights and activation. And so the objective is to find an optimal invertible matrix P that minimizes the F norm of the quantization error. Specifically, we consider 3 formulations. One, the direct quantization of weights and activation. And the second one is the quantization after applying the transformation to the input. The third one is the quantization after applying both X and the XP and the P minus W. In all cases, the idea is the same. We want to learn the transformation matrix that after the quantization, the product x multiplied by w is preserved as closely as possible. So this formulation turns the quantization problem into such an optimization problem. Okay, let's go on to see how to solve it. So in this paper, let's say they try to introduce the conception of correlator decomposition. The motivation here is simple because they follow the spring funds. Spring funds will learn the shared affine transformation matrix, so it's much efficient. But they try to do each layer's affine transformation matrix, so they cost a lot. That's why they need to think a better idea. So they try to introduce the correlator decomposition to reduce the computational cost. Okay, it's about their motivation. And the first point here is that the weights combined with the p-1, you can see the second term maybe, then they can be pre-computed offline. So we don't need to compute it every time we do the do the inference. However, for another variable, the input side transformation, the multiplication of the activation with x with p. So we must do it online. It's the inference because the input x varies every time. So we have to do it. If each linear layer they had a very large unique p, so this will create a heavy computational burden, just like I said. So to address this, they use a correlator decomposition. And instead of storing a full large matrix P, so the decomposition idea is to decompose them into two small matrices, and we can try to do the optimization based on these small matrices. And in the end, we can have a much lower time cost. So this is the definition of the correlator decomposition. And the P will be decomposed with two matrices, P1 and P2. And here is the trick, the vectorization trick. So based on the vectorization trick, we can turn the previous equation. We can now make the original P matrix into one P1 transpose, and the X. This x1 means that they reduce the dimension 1 and do the multiplication. So yeah, we will see the details in the next page. So it's about the solution. Yes, the original paper, they use a different notation on the reshaped X. So now I use the tensor-based notation because I think it have 3 dimensions. So I think we shouldn't use X-tailed in a tensor way. Anyway, with correlator decomposition, the large affine matrix P now is expressed as the production of the smaller matrix P1 and P2. And however, we need to reshape the original X because our input X is K multiplied by N. Now we decompose it into K multiplied by N1 and multiplied by N2. And this is about the decomposition of the X. So we get a new X-tailed now. The W-tailed is similar. They are shaped from the original weight. And both the weights and activations will be converted back after the reshape, multiplication, and all of these operations. So let's look at how much memories or computation they save. The benefits here they are clear. This factorization saves memory by up to half and reduce computation by approximately n squared divided by 2, especially when the n1 is equal to n2. So anyway, this decomposition is both balanced and efficient. And this paper actually, the authors use other tricks to get a higher result. The first one is the per channel scaling. And the second one is the learnable clipping threshold. First, the post-channel scaling, which means learnable scaling vector diag C is applied before quantization. It helps balance the outliers across channels. This method is following other previous works. And the second point here is they introduced the learnable clipping thresholds, alpha W and alpha A, instead of using grid search to find the clipping values. They treat them as learnable parameters optimized jointly with the transformation matrices. So they will be optimized during training. This is our training objective. For each transformer block, they want the optimized block to behave as closely as possible to the original full precision block. Formally, they minimize the F norm between the outputs of the two blocks. Here, the Fx denotes the original block, while F hat X denotes the quantized block. And we have the learnable parameters like the transformation matrices P, and the C is the scaling vector. After A, the alpha A and alpha W is the learnable clipping threshold. Let's look at the framework. We focus on the subfigure A, the notations. So we have the pink block represents the merged and quantized weights denoted as W, and the green vertical bars indicate the pairwise merged scaling vectors. And the blue squares Q and Q inverse denotes the quantization and the dequantization functions. Finally, is the blue circles labeled by the P stand for the affine transformation. So let's look at the whole structure. Now we have self-attention and the feed-forward network. In their subfigure B, it illustrates how the FlatQuant is integrated into the conventional llama layer. First, from left to right, let's say in the attention block, they have the transformation matrices PA, PO, PLV, and the PV, PH and the PV. Specifically, the PA, firstly, will flatten the input activation for QK and V, and the PO will smooth the activations for the output projection. And the PH and PV are applied per head to the P and the value caches. And they also, in the feed-forward network, they use the PUG for the up projection inputs and the PD for the down projection inputs. And anyway, let's look at the self-attention block. The input first pass through a layer loom and an affine transformation PA followed by the quantization. Each of the weight matrices for key and value shown in pink will be pre-processed with the inverse transformation PA-1 merged with the scaling vector, of course. And after the attention operation, output projection matrix will undergo the same procedure. On the right side, we can see the feed-forward network here. The up projection weights WU and the WG, they are merged with the scaling vectors too. And they will be quantized and passed through the activation function. And then the down projection weights will be transformed and quantized in a similar way. And we also have a subfigure C is about some details. Examples about the down projection layer. So they zoom into one concrete examples. On the left, you can see the quantized weights tensor W tilde. They are merged with the scaling vector. And on they will be merged with the scaling vector diag C. This such a redistribution step ensures that scaling is absorbed into the weights. On the right, similarly, the input tensor exhaled will be normalized by the scaling vector and then aligned with the affine transformation P2. And here's some difference between the FlatQuant and the previous corals or spin quants. Let's say the corals and the spin quants, they often replace, sorry, replace their norm with IM's norm, and then they will merge the rotations into the preceding layers for efficiency. However, in this paper, they FlatQuant they keeps the original layer norm and applies none affine transform after it. So it will allow each block to have its own tailored transformation, enhancing their expressiveness, or you can say some speciality. However, this will also makes more cost. Anyway, let's look at the experiment. So this is on the language generation task. This slide reports perplexity on Wikitext2 and the C4 datasets. They compile Llama models quantized to 4-bit weights and activations with FlatQuant method. And the results show that proposed FlatQuant achieves the perplexity very close to the full precision. And it's much better than other SOTA methods. It's another task on the real short question answering tasks. So for example, they have the travel query or nature questions. Again, we can see that the FlatQuant maintains accuracy that's nearly indistinguishable from the full precision. And we can go on to see other evaluations. This figure shows inference latency. Let's say they measure both prefill speed. The prefill speed is the time to process the input prompt, and they also report the decoding speed, the token generation rate. So they're using Llama 2.7b now as the example, and the proposed FlatQuant achieves significant speeds up across all the battery sizes. Here, they studied the trade-off between core product sizes and the performance. So now they try to vary the decomposition dimensions N1 and 2. They can control the balance between speed and accuracy. So in this figure, we can see that the optimal setting we can roughly balance the N1 and the N2, and also it will achieve a strong perplexity while providing the prefill speedups. It's another example of the overhead of each online transformation. So now they break down the effects of applying different online P matrices. The results show that even with multiple transformations per layer, the overhead is minimal and the overall speed up remains substantial. This confirms that their proposed core-naked factorization strategy is very effective. This is another experiment on the relationship between flatness and the quantization error. Okay, they define the flatness with the F norm. I need to mention it. For each transformer block in the Llama 8B, they measure the flatness and compare it with the S-squared error. So the results show that the flat distribution leads to smaller quantization errors, and this provides direct evidence for their central hypothesis. The flatness matters for quantization. And they also do ablation study. They have proposed 3 modules or 3 methods. Let's say their learnable transformation, the learnable AOCT is let me think. We have affine transformation, scaling factor, and the clipping threshold. Yes, these 3 methods. And they also try to fuse their method into the kernel for better efficiency. So the idea, they merge the multiple small GPU kernels, such as matrix transformation, quantization, or multiplication into a single kernel. This will further reduce memory traffic and the kernel launch overhead, making the inference faster. And their kernel is based on OpenAI Triton operator. Yes, the kernel fusion will be very useful for the no bits quantization. You can see in the next page, they have some results. So they quantify the effects of the kernel fusion by fusing the kernels in their FlatQuant. We can see the additional speeds up in both prefill and the decoding phases. And this is the conclusion. Let me conclude this talk. This paper started with the observation of the flatness and of the weights and activation. They say it's very important for effective quantization. And they prove that existing solutions, even with rotations, still leave the steep outliers. So their proposed FlatQuant introduce fast and learnable fine transformation together with the correlate decomposition and clipping or scaling tricks to explicitly promote the flatness. So as a result, they achieve lower quantization error, faster inference, and accuracy close to full precision. Yes. Thank you for your attention.